Welcome to the Transformative Principal podcast, where we learn how to be an amazing educational leader. I am your host, Jethro Jones. Are you ready to be a transformative principal? I'm looking for about 10 people who are ready to do what it takes to lead with integrity, find balance, and take your school to the next level. If you're looking to improve your leadership in a measurable way, go to transformativeprincipal.org/mastermind to see if you qualify to join a group of like-minded people who are ready to be the best principals in the country. Transformative Principal, episode 196 with Dan Kelley. I'm really excited about this interview with the president of NASSP. We are going to talk about some great things, including grading and all kinds of other fun stuff. So I hope you enjoy this. It's going to be a great conversation. And please take a minute to share it with somebody else who can learn from this as well. Enjoy the interview with Dan Kelley. Welcome to the Transformative Principal podcast. I am excited to have Dan Kelley, the president of the National Association of Secondary School Principals. And Dan, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the Transformative Principal.
My pleasure. This is exciting. This is my first podcast, so I'm excited to talk with you this morning, and hopefully we'll have some good topics to share with your listeners out there today.
Well, good. I'm pretty excited that this is your first one. I think of all the podcasts you could do, this is probably the best one to be your first one.
I agree 100%.
Well, that's great. So you're currently the president of NASSP, but would you talk a little bit about your background and career before we get into the interview?
Sure. So I've been in education. This will be, I think this is year 20 that I've been in the education field. And so I live in Rhode Island. I'm a high school principal in Smithfield, Rhode Island, at Smithfield High School. But my career actually started way back in the Midwest. And so I started out as an elementary and special education major at Bowling Green State University, and got my first teaching job was a middle school in Springfield, Ohio, teaching math and science and health in a pretty urban and distressed community. And I couldn't have asked for a better first year experience. And then one of my teammates from college called me one day that year and said, "Listen, I have an opening up in Michigan. You need to come on up. And I guarantee you it'll be a significant pay raise of what you're making right now, and will be fun to work together." And went up there and went into special education, and it was another unique setting. It was middle school, but it was an 8-9 middle school, and so we were teaching the high school curriculum, and so it was kind of an interesting mix. But I learned a ton, and that's when I first started to think about getting into leadership and into getting into administration, because I had some absolutely fantastic mentors at that building. Fate would lead me to meeting my wife, and a story that's not for this podcast. That's for a different time. But I ended up meeting my wife, and she was teaching and coaching in Rhode Island. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to take a shot. And so I came out here and visited, and we started dating, and she got me a job at her high school, at Tiverton High School here in Rhode Island. And they basically hired me sight unseen. It was a male special ed teacher who could coach. You know, back then that was like striking gold.
Check.
So I ended up moving out here for a year and coached and did the special ed gig at the high school. And then I decided to continue my master's degree in administration and educational leadership. And so enrolled at Providence College and took a year off, which was probably one of the best things that I did, in that it gave me a full year to really immerse myself in the curriculum, the culture. I was a grad assistant there, so I got to work behind the scenes in program development at the college level. It was a lot of fun. It was a great year. And I left there, graduated, and jumped right into an assistant principal's role at Cranston High School East in Cranston, Rhode Island, which was probably the fourth or fifth largest town here in Rhode Island. And interesting, there's a east side and a west side. There's a clear dividing line, and there's a clear line of in regards to just the student population, the communities. And so I was on the east side. It was very much of an urban. There was a very gang element to that side of town, which made for some really interesting days and stories. And so I was there. I had another fantastic mentor in Don Frederick, who was our principal, and he gave me a lot of opportunities to really spread my wings and learn and try new things and experiment and fail and get back up again and try again. And an opportunity opened up in Smithfield, Rhode Island. And it just happened to be that I was moving to that town, and it also happens to be the town that my wife grew up in, and so, which is kind of strange. And so I was hired. I was one of the youngest principals ever in Rhode Island. I think I was hired around, 31, 32, 33, somewhere in there, and started my career at Smithfield, and had a great run. Been there 11 years now. Just finished my 11th. I've worked with some fantastic teachers and administrators. I got couple of my assistant principals have moved on to take on roles in their own buildings, and one of them is Alan Tenrero, who was the National Principal of the Year 2 years ago. Worked in my building, and we had a great team going for about 6 years, and had a lot of fun together. But really transformed education in our building. So here I am now. 2 years ago, I decided to run for president of NASSP. I'd been serving on the national board for a couple of years, and said, you know what, now's the time to go for that. And it's a pretty rigorous process. And I was fortunate to win that. And so I spent last year as president-elect, which is not too much. A little bit of travel, but it's not too taxing. And then I took a leave of absence. School committee granted me that for this year. And I go and I work for NASSP now. And I get to spend the year traveling around the country and going to conferences and going to meetings at different regions and different states. And I get to spend a lot of time down in D.C. advocating for principals, and down on the Hill. About a week and a half ago, I was down at the State Department working with some folks there and some folks from ASCD on some new standards. Only been a month since I've been president, but I've been to a couple of different states already. It's really been an amazing run so far. And it's amazing is that we're all dealing with the same problems. No matter if I'm in Vermont, if I'm in, Virginia and Washington, Phoenix, wherever, sometimes the contexts are a little bit different, but we're all dealing with the same things: equity, the violence in our communities. How do we increase rigor? How do we change these archaic ways of thinking in a lot of our schools that meet the needs of a kid who's, going into college here in a couple of years, and, in 2020, and we're still in this kind of archaic model where we only teach for 180 days. So it's fun. It's challenging work, but I'm really excited for this upcoming year and getting to learn from principals around the country. Yeah,
that's pretty exciting. Hopefully you can make it up to Alaska at some point in the year.
It's on my list, man. I'd love to. I would love to get up there.
Right. So, one of the things you said right there at the end that I think for me, it always seems crazy how, we're still, like you said, teaching in this archaic way. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is if we adapted the way that we taught to be different and less focused on compliance, because it seems like that's where so much of the challenge comes in, and more focused on really engaging kids and meeting them where they're at, I feel like people would be able to withstand teaching for longer during the year rather than only 180 days. And, I feel like there's hope for different styles of teaching and learning that we can start implementing that'll be more powerful, I guess. And so that's just something that I hope comes to pass. I think eventually we're going to get to the point where it's not a, summer's off for education anymore. And if we're still teaching the same way we're teaching, it's going to be a long year, and that's going to be tough.
I remember a couple, this is probably 3 years ago, I was on a Twitter chat on a Sunday night for our Rhode Island chat, EdChat RI. And I had mentioned in that chat something about how the role of the school needs to change, and that we have to get out of this concept of we're stuck in 6 hours or 5 hours and 45 minutes, and if you're in Rhode Island, of teaching a day, and that schools really need to change and become kind of hubs where kids can kind of come in and out depending on their needs, their learning styles. And it's not that schools will go away and teachers will go away. It's just, it has to be different. And I upset a lot of people that day. And I had teachers that were on that chat cussing me out, and they were upset because they thought I meant get rid of teachers. And that is not at all. We cannot, it's not about getting rid of teachers, but we have to rethink the role of the teacher. And it cannot be, a teacher standing in front of a room, just spitting out facts. And, when in the age of Google and Bing and all these crazy search engines, we don't need that anymore. But when you say that to a teacher who's, been making a living and raised a family and done this for 28 years, and you tell them, to try to change their practice, that's hard. And that's some of the lessons that I've learned about how personal teachers take things. And it's out of love and passion for their kids, and they want to see them do better. But to try to encourage someone to change who's been doing something and doing it fairly well for 28 years, that's a difficult conversation to have. And it can lead to a lot of anxiety, and can lead to it can add a lot of stress on a faculty and really, really disrupt cultures.
Yeah, well, I think part of that issue there is that, I shouldn't say it like that. Part of what makes that so challenging is that teachers, rightfully so, feel like teaching is a calling, and that there's, a higher power or something greater than themselves pushing them to do it. And so talking about anything that takes away their ability to fulfill that calling is very challenging. And I get that's not what you're saying, but it's helping them see that it doesn't have to be how it was. And if we can help them see that in a way that is supportive and caring and understanding of where they have been and what they have done, then I think they can make that shift. And, I think you experienced that at Smithfield High School, that you were able to make some of those shifts. Doesn't mean it was easy, but, when people start understanding that you're not trying to take away a job, you're trying to provide job security for a changing world, that's where the difference comes in. And that's been my experience as well with that.
I think there's a huge disconnect too right now between the teacher preparation programs and what's happening in schools, and it happened in administrator programs as well. There's still a disconnect there, I think, where you've got instructors that are sometimes teaching these courses or teaching new teachers, and they haven't been in a classroom in 15 or 20 years. And so I really think there needs to be more dialogue that's taking place, K to 16, K to 20, getting into a little more to help with this. I still think there's a lot of people that go into teaching sometimes as a backup plan, and because it's a great career, and you can be really successful and make a great living and raise a family and do those things. But when you start talking about really individualizing instruction to that kid, and then you can't do that in a structure with 35 kids in a room. It's impossible for one adult to do that. So I think there's a lot structurally that we have to look at as communities and K to 16, K to 20 with the colleges to help speed up this shift.
Yeah. Well, I just moved to Fairbanks to start a new principal job up here. And the whole reason, thank you. The whole reason that I came up here was because of the personalized learning approach that they are taking, and the whole district is on board. It is part of their strategic plan. They've talked about it at every meeting, and that has been the focus of everything that we're doing. And I just got to say, I am so excited about it that I just cannot believe that I'm actually here. The things that you're talking about that I've been trying to, shove down people's throats in every school I've been in, I'm finally not only not having to ask for forgiveness when I do something related to it, but my superintendent is actively telling me and every other adult in the buildings that we need to go down this path. And I am just tickled that I get to be part of this, and part of it really at the ground floor where I'm at a middle school, and the middle school group schools are the ones that are just starting it right now. And so I mean, all the things that I've been working towards my whole career are finally culminating. And it's just exciting to see what that is going to do for our students. And it's something that I've been waiting for, it seems like forever. And it's just exciting to be part of that.
Yeah, it's you hit it on the head. Your superintendent is leading the charge, and you've got to have that. We call them school committees. Some districts call them school boards. If you've got that power and that backing from them, and you've got that clear vision, great things can happen. And I think in a lot of districts across the country, we get caught up in test scores and community pressure and rankings, and that's something that is sometimes thrown back at me. Sometimes is, for example, our high school in Smithfield, we are not a very strong AP curriculum. And a lot of the rankings that are used in our area and nationally look at AP scores. But we have a great alternative at our high school. We have an early enrollment program, and we've been one of the leaders in that in Rhode Island now for well over probably 25 years now. And at one point, we had the highest enrollment of kids taking college-level classes in high school. And so we would have kids that would be graduating with 16 to sometimes 22 college credits. They'd have a semester and a half done before they graduated, but that wouldn't count in the rankings. That wouldn't count in the conversation because it was about AP scores. And I would put our credits were accepted, I think about 85% of most colleges. That's a great deal for families. And while I believe in trying to have balance and a strong AP and a strong EEP, it's tough to get penalized in the newspapers when they say your ranking's no good because you don't have AP. But no one's asking, well, what do you have instead of that? And so it boils down to something that I've learned, and it's been reinforced a lot lately, is, as principals and as superintendents, we have to tell our story. We have to control that message as much as possible. And I think that's a big breakdown, especially in principal preparation programs. We're not trained to be marketers. We're not trained to be, communication strategists. And yet I found in the last 5-6 years, that's been the most important. That's been at the top of my list. Has been telling my story and getting my message out and controlling my message and what my school's all about.
That is so true. And that matters no matter what level you're at as a teacher, as a principal, as a superintendent. That's what you've got to be doing. And if you're not telling your story, somebody else is, and you just can't let that continue. It's just not good.
Right. Yep. Just not good. It's that simple. That's not that good.
So, on that front, one of the things that I've been trying to focus on is telling that story. And as you said, we're not trained marketers or anything like that. So what's your advice for someone who wants to tell that story, but just doesn't quite know how yet? What would you say they should do to get started? How should they be telling that story?
So we started out simply just by getting to where the parents were. We started with Facebook, and we created, our policies prohibited it. And as you said earlier, sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Exactly. So I started a Facebook page and just did it. And, nobody really caught on for a little while, and then eventually people started to see the power and the traction that it was gaining, and really just trying to hit families there. And that made that took a big dent. Just that simple step of, I didn't ask for feedback. I wasn't, putting questions out there. It was more of just getting information out. And no matter if I had it on my Google Calendar or on the school website, most parents were going to Facebook first and getting a lot of their news and information there. So just putting that out made a huge difference. Then I started to shift to a blog. And it's not necessarily a blog where I was sharing feelings. It was more of just general information. Instead of doing a weekly newsletter, I did a weekly blog. And then using technology, linking that to the Facebook page, linking that to the Twitter account that we ultimately created as well. And so that you only have to do it once, and then you let the technology feed it out to all of your different platforms. And so right now, I still get a couple calls or questions saying I can't find things, but between the school calendar, the school website, the Facebook page, the Twitter page, and the blog, most stuff you can find. but we're also at the same time sharing pictures, sharing stories, sharing highlights. And that's really worked for us in our district. Now, recently, we just, state of Rhode Island is in an interesting spot because our career and technical education programs are now, if you're out of district, you're now eligible to go to those. And the per pupil funding follows the kid. And so we have a lot of comprehensive high schools like myself that have very strong CTE programs. And we are now marketing and selling ourselves to try to bring in kids from outside of our community into our high school. And that $15,000 comes with them. And so it's been a really interesting conversation in our district now, because I don't have those skills for marketing, web design, advertising. I went out and got permission to hire a company to assist us with that. And so I hired a communications firm, or the district did, but we were the catalyst to make that happen. And it's been a slow developing process. The high school has jumped on board, and we've been using them. And it started off as just talking about our CTE programs and building a new website, a new platform to advertise and promote those programs. But it's turned into, if we have a crisis situation, I now have somebody to send my press release to that is not connected to it, that can give me feedback on it before I send that out to the public.
Yeah,
that's important. But not everybody has the money to do something like that. But the group that we went with, is an emerging company that is starting to focus just on school districts and helping them. So I would encourage people to look into something like that, because there might be some good deals that you could find that would be fairly inexpensive that could help you crafting your story, especially in those crisis types of scenarios.
Yeah, that's really important. One of the other aspects of that I think gets overlooked a lot is when you go to a new school, or like I just made a transition. I don't know what the district policy is on how to update the website and who's in charge of that. I've also got all new front office staff. So, nobody really knows what's going on. But what I can do is jump on Facebook, create a page for my school, and start sharing things just like that. And so that's what I've been doing. So it's taken some time for the new person in our communications department to update the website with things like open house information. So I do that on the Facebook page, and now I've got a much more personal connection with everybody that likes it, and that makes us have a better relationship, so that when they come into the school, they know more about it and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we try to do so much is we make things more complicated than they have to be. But
Right.
I mean, if you know how to use Facebook, then you can do a page and get your story out there and just start with that. And
Right.
It doesn't have to be as complicated as, creating a whole new website or anything like that. It's really quite simple and doesn't take very much to do at all.
The other thing I would caution, and this is something that I've paid the price now for a while, was I started that Facebook page. I controlled the content. And so it was only recently that I started to give up permissions for other people to control the content.
Oh, yeah.
And so you don't want it to all fall, and sometimes as the building leader, we take control of things, and then we don't want to give up control, or we're afraid to give control. And so I would encourage anybody who's taking, this next step, give your secretary control of that Facebook page, so they can help with that. Give your assistant principals or principal, if your key teacher leaders, access to some of those. And so that was something I was leery of doing at first, because again, I wanted to control the message. I wanted to I guess I was probably nervous at times of, you don't want someone to put out the wrong thing or screw up. But as principals, there's so much on our plates. We can't own it all the time. And so if we can delegate that, or give some permission, at least to our secretary, to say, hey, can you go post this on Facebook that this event's coming up, or this, sports have been changed. I think that would make lives a lot easier for principals.
I enjoyed that interview with Dan, and I am looking forward to learning more from him. Next week, we're going to get more into the discussion about grading and and get some solid ideas on how we can work with that. And then we're going to talk about NASSP and its role in 2017. Thanks so much for listening and have a wonderful week.
Transformative Principal is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators by educators. Visit edupodcastnetwork.com for more great podcasts.